Welcome everybody to the Put Local on Your Tray Farm to School in the Classroom training. I'm going to get started, just pulling up the PowerPoint. Wonderful. All righty, so welcome in. Like I said, this is the Farm to Classroom training series. This is a Connecticut Grown for Connecticut Kids training. Whether or not you are a grantee, doesn't matter in this room. We have some folks that do have the grant, we have others that do not have the grant, but everybody is here to learn more about bringing farm to school education into their classrooms, into their schools. My name is Abby Dubois. I work with Yukon Extension's Put Local on Your Tray program. I am a technical assistant and I provide support to the Connecticut Grown for Connecticut Kids grantees. I am also a part of the Connecticut Farm to School Collaborative Steering Committee, and I do a lot of this farm to school, farm to cafeteria, classroom work throughout the state. And I'm joined here tonight by Emma Rotner, who I will let introduce herself now.
Hello, everyone. My name is Emma Rotner, and I have been an educator in Groton Public Schools for the past 7.5 years and have been on a farm to school journey throughout that time. I started with Groton Public Schools as a Food Corps service member back in 2017, and I was partnered with 2 elementary schools doing hands-on lessons in the school garden, taste tests, building school gardens because our schools didn't have it yet, doing classes about nutrition and food access. And during my 2 years of Food Corps, I just really fell in love with that work and also saw the impacts that it was having on my students, my school, my community, and really wanted to continue it. So when my time with Food Corps was coming to an end, I wrote 2 farm to school grants, a USDA grant and a private grant to help to continue the work. And through those grants, I was able to stay on for 2 years as the district farm to school coordinator, where we took the work that I had done at Food Corps and scaled it up to all of the schools in the district to create a district-wide farm to school team and program. After those 2 years, my district opened up 2 elementary schools that were that had magnet themes. And I began working as the magnet coordinator at these 2 schools. So my current role is working at an environmental and marine magnet school and to play an ingenuity magnet school to help implement the magnet themes into the school days. I still get to do a lot of school garden work at the environmental school, which is really great. So I stay connected to farm to school in that way. And then, like Abby, I'm also part of the Farm to School Connecticut Collaborative Steering Team.
Thanks, Emma. All right, so today's agenda, it is so full and robust. We're so excited to get into it. So following these introductions and welcomes, we will be moving into an overview of the 3 C's. From there, Emma will be leading us through a couple examples of some amazing farm to school lessons. And then following that, we will be moving into breakout rooms where each room will have one of Emma's lessons, and we'll be asking you to scale up the lesson or scale it down. We'll give you some prompts there. So really this whole meeting, this whole training is thinking about how we can take pre-existing farm to school lessons and alter them and transform them into lessons that meet your students, the ages that you work with, the communities that you serve. So while we're getting started and getting into the content of the meeting, I'd like to ask everybody to introduce themselves in the chat. If you could please put in your name, where you're from, where you work, what you do, one of those, and then either the age group that you work with currently or the age group that you love to work with the most if you're not currently working directly with children. Again, your name, what you do, and your favorite age group or the age group you work with. Awesome. Once we get through our breakout rooms, we'll have a little share out. We'll have some questions at that time, and then we will be walking you through a whole toolkit of resources that you can peruse following this meeting that will hopefully, help you create a really amazing potential curriculum for your community and district. And then at the end, we'll have some housekeeping. There will be a survey following this. So please stay on to the end of the meeting. And if you are not able to stay through the meeting, we'll send the survey out after. We really appreciate your feedback on these trainings. It helps us make them the best they can be. And then to end, we'll have some more, questions and check-ins. All right. Again, I see all of the chat coming in. Amazing. Put this in. Let us know who you are, where you're coming from, and who you're working with. So from this meeting, hopefully participants will have an increased familiarity with the 3Cs. If you don't know what the 3Cs are, we're going to get into that right now. You'll leave here with an increased confidence integrating farm to school education into lessons and become familiar with how farm to school activities can be altered to fit your communities. So the 3Cs are a tool created by Vermont Feed. Vermont Feed is a program in Vermont that is Vermont's farm to school. And so this tool they created and has kind of been passed around as just a really great visual and a really great way to make goals and take action in this type of work wherever you are. So today we're really going to be talking a lot about this green circle, the classroom, and how farm to school can be brought into that sector. But I don't want to move forward until we cover what farm to school looks like in a cafeteria and in a community. The idea with this tool is that when farm to school is integrated into these three sectors, it becomes a sustainable and integral part of the school community, the district's health, the larger community around that district itself. So in the cafeteria, there is a lot of work happening, especially it feels in Connecticut. We have so much happening with purchasing local food, more taste tests happening in cafeterias. I've heard it said that the cafeteria is the biggest classroom in the school, and we're seeing a lot of people take advantage of the fact that the kids come in and they're sitting down, and it is a time where they get to be social and they don't have to be in their classroom setting, but it's a great way to engage them over local food, the food being served in the lunch line, taste tests, focus groups, all of those amazing things. We do have people in the room today that are food service directors or food service staff and are not necessarily working directly with children. I appreciate you coming to this training today, because that kind of shows this overlap between the green and the yellow circle, where districts that are really looking for this central farm to school programming are coming and making sure that they're sitting in the classroom trainings, in the cafeteria trainings. And then looking at the red circle, the community. So this is really where you want to go beyond the walls of the school. The classroom, you're really able to impact children on the educational level. The cafeteria, you can have all different experiences with food. But when we're looking at the community, that's when we want to see parents involved, guardians, local restaurant owners, the farmers, especially, ways that they can come in and be a part of the school community, whether that's a farmer visiting a cafeteria taste test or a farmer coming into a classroom and doing a lesson about agriculture, and talking about scaling that up. A farmer is exciting to come into a high school classroom just as they're exciting to go into a kindergarten classroom. And so we're looking at ways where these all come together, and the goal and the purpose is that once you've really solidified what farm to school looks like in each of these three bubbles, the farm to school program will then be very sustainable. It'll have longevity, and it'll be able to really grow and grow. This link, the Vermont Feed link, it is in the agenda, as are all of the links that we'll be going through today. So feel free to check that out. This link is just going to tell you about their program. They have an amazing toolkit. Again, with that action planning, what next steps can you take? At this point, does anybody have questions about the 3Cs? Feel free to put things in the chat as well. Okay. So moving on, I will pass it to Emma to talk to us about teaching farm to school.
All right, so as Abby mentioned, I'm going to be getting into a couple of lesson examples as we go through the webinar today. But before doing that, I wanted to set the stage a little bit of some tips and best practices when integrating farm to school into your curriculum, into your teaching practices. And so a really great tip to start out with is just to start small. I think that reflecting on my own journey with farm to school, when I started out, I was like, we are going to have farm to school integrated into every subject, into every day. We are going to have the food that we are growing be supplementing the food in the cafeteria. And these are all really great goals. However, they all are also a little bit of lofty goals. And so dialing that focus back and seeing where can I just start to get farm to school into the school day? What's a small way that I can integrate it into a student's day, into a teacher's curriculum, into the cafeteria? That ends up building a much more sustainable program than trying to go all in at once when folks aren't necessarily ready for that. So that can be something as simple as focusing on what students are interested in and taking those interests and running with them. If a student's really interested in pollinators, maybe it's taking them outside just to go on a search to see different pollinators and notice what's going on around them. And then the other thing is to integrate that farm to school work into what you're already doing. I think there's so much going on in education and in schools today. So instead of trying to make farm to school something separate and something additional to what you're already doing, there are so many really simple and easy ways to integrate farm to school into the work that you are already doing with your students. So if you're working on measurements in math or graphing in math, you could have students measure the growth of plants over time and graph that. And that's a great way to integrate some farm to school education while also accomplishing curriculum goals that you already are working on. And then farm to school lessons do not require a school garden or a full kitchen. I think that a lot of times with starting out with farm to school, we do have that vision of having a really big outdoor learning space that students can use and that they can be using those foods that they're growing in cooking lessons and in a kitchen. However, there's a lot of other ways that you can integrate farm to school without having all of these resources available to you. So if you don't have these resources, there are a lot of ways that you could take like a bean seed and grow beans in a classroom or even in a bag and have farm to school lessons going on that way without necessarily needing a school garden to achieve all of these things. And then if you do have access to an outdoor space, something that I have found is incredibly important, regardless of what age group you are working with, is to set those outdoor expectations with your students. It is absolutely great that students get really excited to go outside, but as an educator, it can also be a lot to manage when students get very excited heading to an outdoor space, especially if this is something that's novel for them. So setting outdoor expectations ahead of time is a really great way to still accomplish your lesson goals while also taking students outside. Something that I like to do when I'm teaching outdoors is to set some parameters and boundaries for students. So if you have a garden space or an outdoor space, setting, you can walk nowhere past the shed, or if you have a sidewalk, you can't walk past the sidewalk, just so students know what space they can explore. And also sometimes just leaning into that student curiosity when you're outside. I think that if you go outside with a very specific goal of what you want to accomplish outside or in a school garden, it can sometimes be you can get caught off track by a worm that pops up. And sometimes instead of fighting that student curiosity when they find a worm, it's best to just lean into it, and maybe your lesson becomes a little bit more about worms that day than what you had originally planned. So really leaning into letting nature be the teacher rather than always going in with a very set expectation of what you want to accomplish outside. Another great tip for doing outdoor education is working in groups. So oftentimes when I'm outside with a whole class of around 20 students, I might have 3 stations, and 2 of them can be really hands-on stations that keep kids engaged, like shoveling and looking through the soil, or weeding and helping out the garden, and then having 1 station where we really are focusing on an educational task. and then I can have students rotate through those 3 stations. That can help make it a little bit more manageable versus trying to keep 25 students all focused on the same lesson at one time. And then last little tip is when you are outside, if you give them some time to explore, having a callback is a really great tool so that you can make sure that students are ready to come back when you need them to come back. With younger students, I always love to use the busy bees, come back to me, and they'll buzz on up and then they're ready to listen. So those are some tips that I've picked up over the years of working in farm to school world and then also working in outdoor education.
Great, thank you. All right. And with that, we'll move into the lessons.
Awesome. So this first lesson I call sensory soil. And the main question with this lesson is, what is soil and what makes soil good? And can some soils be healthier than others? And so I think that there's a lot of different adaptations with this lesson. And one of the best things about this lesson is you absolutely don't need a garden to do this lesson. I have done this lesson where I've taken soil from my own home or from the woods around a school because we didn't have a school garden and brought soil in bins into a classroom and had students look at it this way. But if you do have a garden or an outdoor space that you are allowed to dig in, this is a really fun way to get students connected to the outdoors and also to soil. I think this is something that a lot of students don't really think that much about. They don't realize how valuable and important soil is. So this is a really great way to get them a little bit more connected. So there's a lot of different ways that you could approach this. You could start off by teaching about the different types of soil and where we might find different types of soil. But something that I like to do is just have students take time to have self-discovery first. So I might give students a shovel and either a piece of paper and an egg carton and provide them spaces that they can dig with a partner. And they'll dig up a little bit of soil and put it on their egg carton or their piece of paper. And the task of this lesson is to really sort through the soil to see what are you finding in the soil, what do you notice about it. I offer different sensory questions in this lesson, so there is a little worksheet for the students to fill out if you scroll down, Abby. Thank you. So this could be really great for elementary students who want to get involved with their senses when they are outside. So having the students feel the soil, try to describe it. And this is just a very simple worksheet that kind of guides their thought process with it. And as they're sorting through the soil, I often like to, like I said, give them an egg carton and have them sort the soil almost as if they were scientists dissecting the soil. And as they're doing this, I prompt them to share out what they're finding, what they're noticing. If I have time and we can dig in several different places, I love for them to compare what soil looks like in the garden versus on a field where people have been walking on it versus in a forest where there's a lot of leaves that have been covering the soil. And this can lead to so many different questions for the students. And then also to take that soil and then to even try to grow plants within the soil is a really great experiment that students can do. And then also taking the materials that they find, like rocks or roots or not insects for this one, but the things that they find in the soil, I'll have them rub those materials together and try to see, like, can you turn those materials into soil? How long do you think that these items would take to break down into soil? And what is soil ultimately used for in the end? So this has been a really great lesson as an introduction to farm to school for a lot of students. And like I said, it's a really great introductory lesson if you don't have access to a garden at that time, or if you don't even have that many outdoor spaces, because it's so easy to find a little bit of soil or sand and bring it in and have students explore it with different senses.
Awesome. There's a few more pages here too, if you want to talk through.
Yeah, so this is, like I was saying, that lesson is a really great introductory lesson, but there's a lot of different extensions that you can take with this lesson. So like I mentioned, if you had wanted to teach about soil parts, you can take those scoops of soil that you had collected, and you can put them in a jar with some water. And when you shake that soil up with the water, eventually it will separate into those different layers. So you'll start to notice that there's sand and there's silt and there are clay layers. So that can be a really great way for the students to actually realize, like, I think a lot of students, when they're looking at dirt, they just think of it as dirt and they don't realize all of the components that go into it and then how valuable it is. And so to have them do this experiment is always pretty mind-blowing for students to realize that those different components existed within the soil that they were taking for granted. And then certainly you can talk about what those different components offer the soil, and then why have students question why they might have those different separations, why the clay might be at the bottom of the jar. Yes, and this is what I was talking about with that soil dissection of, after they really explore the soil, having them take it apart. So doing the sensory components and then trying to dissect the soil and figure out, what is soil actually made of? So these are a few pictures. I actually created these during distance learning in COVID when we were still trying to offer farm to school. So I think this is a great example of farm to school can happen anywhere. I think this was in my backyard, and I took just a small scoop of soil from my backyard, and I was able to find plants, rocks, roots, leaves, twigs, moss, a lot of different things that I then separated out. So a great example that this lesson can be done whether you have a garden or not, and can be done really anywhere, anytime.
Emma, there's a question in the chat about, are the lessons appropriate to all school age students?
Great question. So like I mentioned, my background is in elementary education, so that's what the focus of these lessons is on. But after I go through explaining these lessons, we're actually going to take the time to look at them and then figure out how could we make these lessons more appropriate to a high school student, because I think there are a lot of extensions that you can do with it. Or how could we make these lessons a little bit more simpler and make them more approachable for an early child care program. All right, any other questions with that lesson? All right, our next lesson is about the plant life cycle. And one of my favorite things to do when I'm outside is a scavenger hunt. Because as I mentioned, I think that students get very excited by wanting to explore everything around them, which is great. And it can also, as an educator, be a little difficult to rein in if you have a focus for a lesson. So a scavenger hunt is a really great way to set a focus, but then also give kids that time to explore and look around them and engage that curiosity. So for this lesson, the focus is teaching students the different life stages or life cycles that plants go through. So I like to begin this lesson by comparing plants to people. So I have kids think about, what are the different stages of life that humans go through? And they can come up with this pretty easily: baby, toddler, kid, teen. And then I say, like, I wonder if we go through these stages, do plants also go through these different stages in life? And so kids will kind of think, I'll give them time to talk. And then eventually they'll start getting to, like, oh, maybe a seed is like a baby, and maybe a sprout is like a toddler. And so we talk through together the different stages that we think plants may go through in their life. So as students are naming them, I might write them on a board. And after we've got some different stages of the plant's life cycle, I like to have kids go through a game that really helps them to remember the life cycle. So after we've named them, I'll have different body movements for the different stages. So for example, a seed, I'll have kids crouch down. And on the ground, they pretend to be a seed. When they sprout, they can grow up a little bit taller. When a plant grows leaves, they can spread their leaves out. When a plant grows a flower, they can make a little flower over their heads. And then when a plant grows a fruit, they can make a fruit. After we have those body movements down, I like to remind them of the rules of rock, paper, scissors, and tell them that we are going to play a life cycle game. And so I have all of the kids crouch down as a seed, and they find a partner to play rock, paper, scissors with. Whoever wins that game of rock, paper, scissors, I say they move on to the next stage of the life cycle. So that kid will then become a sprout. They'll stand up and become a sprout, and they will have to find another sprout within the classroom to play. If the student does not win, they remain a seed and they find another seed to play with. So that keeps going until they've gone through all of the movements. And when they become a plant with a fruit and they win, I say, all right, and what do fruits have inside of them? Like if we eat an apple or we eat a cucumber, what do we find inside of them? And they all get very excited to shout out seeds. And I say, right, so we go back to a seed, because a plant that has made a fruit and then dies will eventually make more seeds and grow more plants. So they go back to a seed and start the life cycle game over again. And I have found that this has been a great way, of course, to get the movement in, but also just to get kids to remember those different stages. After we do that, I will take them outside, and I have a life cycle scavenger hunt for them that I actually took from the Food Corps Toolshed website, which I thought was a really great resource and really engaging for kids. Thank you, Abby. So as you can see here, they show the different stages of a plant's life cycle. A lot of them we have reenacted in our games, so students are pretty familiar with and maybe have a little bit of idea of what they might be looking for. When I hand them this life cycle scavenger hunt, I say this is the entrance ticket into the garden, and I set those boundaries of where they can look for these different stages of the life cycle. Once they have their scavenger hunt, they are allowed to walk around, and I encourage them to draw pictures of where they think they are finding these items. Once they have completed this, I also ask them, remember where you found them. And I'll bring the group back together to share out where we found these different stages of the plant's life cycle. If it's a time when the garden is growing a lot of things, I'll allow kids to harvest examples. So if there's some flowers in the garden, they could pick flowers, or if there's a plant that has fruit on it, they could pick that. And we might arrange a real life cycle of a plant. We might put some seeds and sprouts and show the actual plant life cycle. But if it's a time when there's not a lot of things growing, I might say, all right, go and walk to a garden bed that has a flower in it, or go walk to a garden bed where you found a sprout. And if you're doing this at different times of years, you might not find sprouts. And it's a really great conversation of why are plants not growing sprouts right now, or why do so many plants in our garden look dead right now? And even though I usually do this in the garden, I think that there is still a really great way to do this lesson when you don't have a garden. The other day, I took students around on just a nature walk around our school property, and we were able to find so many plants that had dead fruits on them that were producing seeds. So I think it's a really great opportunity to look at the plants that are growing just around them and to see what stages of the life cycle those plants might be in.
Awesome. We do have a hand raised. Allie, do you have a question?
Hi, I'm sorry. I accidentally raised my hand.
That's okay.
No worries.
Sorry.
You're good.
Are there any questions about this lesson before I go on to our last lesson? All right. When Abby and I were planning this webinar, we talked about wanting to offer a cooking lesson example, but we know that this can often be one of the most challenging components of Farm to School, because cooking can usually require you to get ingredients. It can require you to have materials, maybe to have kitchen access. So I wanted to offer a lesson that did incorporate food and could incorporate cooking, but could also be done without having those materials accessible to you. So this is all about the seasonality of food. And I like to begin this lesson by asking students where they would normally get their food from. And so a lot of students will share about the grocery store, about the cafeteria, and then I introduced them to like, what if those places didn't exist? Like, how did people used to get their food before a grocery store was built or before we had the school cafeteria? And this leads us into a discussion about how people had to grow their own food and how they really relied on their local community to feed them. But we talk about now how we can go to the grocery store and we could get a pineapple or we could get an orange in the middle of winter. So there's a lot of great ways to talk about like where does that food actually come from and where is that food being grown. But because our food is being shipped all over, so many students don't even really realize that that's not how people used to eat, that they didn't always have access to any food they wanted whenever they wanted, or that they couldn't see all of these foods in a grocery store that aren't grown around here. So I like to talk about what foods actually grow in Connecticut and when do they grow in Connecticut, and what would it look like if we could only eat the food from our school garden or from the farms in our area. And so for this activity, I asked them to create their own meal using seasonal foods. So each student would get a seasonal food chart, which I believe Abby has on the next page. Thank you, Abby. So this is an awesome put local on your tray chart that shows all of the foods that are available in Connecticut at different times. And so I asked students to pick their birthday month. So if you are born in May, take a look at what foods are actually growing in May. And I want you to plan a meal around those foods. And you could have it just be only those foods that they have to create a meal around, or you could offer them some pantry items like pasta or something that they might have. But then they have to create a recipe using those ingredients that are available to them. And if you have the opportunity to actually create these recipes, that's really awesome and would be a really incredible extension to this lesson. But an easy way to do this is have them plan it out and then draw it on a paper plate. This is a really great way to like demonstrate the meal that they've created, and then also a great way for them to show their classmates so that they could pass this plate around, show them the foods, and have a conversation of like, if you were born in winter, what foods might you see on your plate and your recipe that you've created versus if you had a summer birthday. So this is a fun way to get kids thinking about food, where it comes from, what grows around here, and our connection to it, without having to go through all the steps of getting all of the ingredients or finding the equipment if that's not available to you.
Awesome. Any questions on seasonal food in the classroom, any of the lessons so far? All righty. So with that, we are going to move into our breakout rooms. So I will pull up the PowerPoint again to show you the prompts. So what's going to happen is everybody will be put into a breakout room. Please, please share, introduce yourself once you get into the room. And then what we're going to do is ask you to scale Emma's 3 lessons, either up or down. Well, we'll actually ask you to scale them both ways. So let me get to enjoy these beautiful pictures. Okay, so like I said, once you get into your breakout rooms, please go around and introduce yourselves. And then as a group, you will be looking at these lessons and scaling them down, scaling them up. So each lesson, and Emma, correct me if I'm wrong, is like second, third, fourth, maybe a little bit higher grade.
Yeah, I would say anywhere in that elementary range is what these are geared for.
Perfect. So once you get into your room, you're going to look at how you can scale these lessons up. So looking at appealing to upper middle school and then into high school. You can be specific with your group, talking about very intentional ways that you can, talking about your students in particular. Like I would do this with my 12th grade students. And then once you've gone through all of the ways that you can scale that lesson up, you'll look at how you can scale it down. So taking it to first graders, kindergartners, and maybe even thinking about early care. We do have some ECE folk in the room, so preschool and younger. And if you don't work with these age groups, I want to challenge everybody to kind of think outside of the box and consider ways that you might alter these to be for bigger kids, littler kids, maybe even if you work with adults, how can you make them appealing to adults? For the lessons, they were sent out in the calendar, and then the agenda also has them. If you scroll down, all of the lessons are underneath the agenda. So we will put the agenda back in the chat so that you have access to the lessons. And we will have about 15 minutes in these breakout rooms. So you can spend about 5 minutes on each lesson. And when we come back, we'll have a little share out to see all the creative things you came up with. Alrighty, so opening rooms now. See you soon.
All right, welcome back, everyone. We hope that you were able to have some good discussions about how you might scale these lessons up to meet the needs of older students, or might scale it down to meet even younger students. I would love to hear some of the conversations that you had. We had a nice little breakout room amongst ourselves, and we're able to hear some really good ideas. So interested what the other rooms talked about. But I thought we could start off with those soil lessons, the soil dissection and the sensory soil. If anyone had any ideas for how they might scale those lessons up for older students, such as high schoolers.
We just kind of talked how to use it as a starting point, and then just add more sophisticated soil testing, maybe identify this type of soil with soil triangles. I mean, just add more like scientific elements, maybe do a percolation test type of thing, but to actually get them putting their hands in the soil kind of thing, even for high school kids, that's often a new experience. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I think Michael and I, our group got a little distracted and chatting about other things. So.
That's good.
Understandable. Anyone else had any? Go ahead.
So, part of our group, we talked about, because we have a program where we call it's like after school, it's called Learn to Earn, where kids really come out like, from 14 to 18, like almost working on the farm. And so, I saw you did that carton lesson where they dissect all the soil in the different areas. It's just similar to show like not every grow bed kind of need the same type of soil, and you probably want to kind of test for that. And so we were looking to get a tester that could test like NPK and like pH levels, so that you really can, so kids could see that science piece at that age, which is a little bit more advanced and maybe a little bit more techie kind of thing happening with them, so I that's what came to my mind when I saw you did that carton lesson. Like, oh wow, that's kind of cool. Like, that's from a kindergarten. This is what high school kids would probably enjoy doing. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. We had someone share a similar idea of doing soil testing and then seeing what different plants needed to grow. So using different soils to see, could all of the plants grow on the same soil, or what happens when plants grow better in a certain pH, but you grow them in a different type of soil. So a lot of experiments that you could follow up with the soil testing. How about for some younger ideas? A way to make this even a little bit more simpler.
I think we can at this point take ideas for any of the lessons. So if anyone has a comment for scaling down the seasonal foods or the plant parts as well, throw that out.
So yeah, I'm dealing, just like apparently somebody in the chat, I'm dealing with animals here. But the the conversation we had was about different levels of soils testing, and we have our younger kids here. I'm at a farm in Greenwich that an independent school, and we do nursery through 12th. So we have the benefit of not having district issues. I mean, meaning it's in one place. Like I can have my 12th graders come down and talk to my nursery. But to do vermiculture and worm castings with our little kids and get their hands in the compost is great. And you could scale it all the way up. And our 6th grade do our soil samples, and then they take that data and hand it off to our other grades. And they, again, in our organic farm, can just pass it on and pass it forward in that way. And I think that's kind of an awesome thing. I also put in the chat about the Shelburne Farm curricula. I think, if you've not seen it, check it out. There's some great stuff there. And again, I hear what you all have been doing too through UConn, and Emma, as you were talking about what you're doing. But I think there's some great resources, especially if you want to download their curricula and look at what can you do to bring different levels together.
Absolutely. Some really great resources out of Shelburne.
Was a good segue for me, this PowerPoint, to share the resources. So keeping an eye on the time, we have 2 minutes. So I want to thank everybody for those breakout rooms and for those awesome ideas. And if you have more ideas or you want to connect, hopefully this room has been a good spot where you might be able to exchange information with folks and continue these conversations. But I just wanted to share a couple of resources with everybody. Again, all of the links and more are in the agenda. So in the top left, we have the Vermont Feed Guidebook. This is where I got my information from about the 3 C's. In the middle, this Grow It, Try It, Like It is an entire curriculum and toolkit. It's really geared towards early care, but as we've learned in this webinar, you can take these lessons that are geared towards little kids and scale them up to meet bigger kids. The ideas and the information stays the same. It's just how you're presenting it. On the right, we have the Shelburne Farms, one of their curriculum. Their website is full of lessons. And then the Edible Schoolyard Project and Food Court as well. If you visit those websites, they have these lessons. For the most part, they are all completely free. You can get Food Court's entire curriculum online and print out the pages that you need. Share them with others in your district. And I think it's really important to notice that we don't need to start from scratch with this work. There's a lot of work that's been done, and we can just take a look at it and use it. I want to name a couple more resources before we break. So Put Local on Your Tray is a UConn extension program, and we really are supporting this farm to school work. On our website, we have a farm directory, which is a interactive map of all of the farms ready and excited to sell food to schools. So if you're looking for a farm in your area that you want to partner with and work with, this map has all of that information for you. And then we have also recently released a toolkit, which is geared more towards the cafeteria sector, but is really great information to learn about how schools can purchase local food. And with that, we have our survey. I put the link in the chat. If you please would fill that out as soon as possible. We really appreciate it. You can also use your phone, take a picture of the screen, and that QR code will bring you to a website for you to fill out the survey. And we really appreciate it. Upcoming trainings in 2025. So if you enjoyed this and you want to learn more about farm to school, we have a whole lot of amazing stuff coming up next year. This is also on the Put Local on Your Tray website under the trainings heading. We'll make sure that Tray website link is in the chat and sent out after this meeting. And then finally, I'm here to help you. So if you have questions, you want to talk to me more about farm to school in the classroom or the other 2 C's, if you want to brainstorm, please reach out to me. I'm happy to provide assistance. Thank you all for coming.